Well, welcome back to the Rob and Amory podcast. It's so funny because,
Welcome back.
yeah, I mean, people have come up to us and said, we love your podcast. Like, where can we
Right.
watch it? And I'm
Right.
like, well, we actually just do little clips. And today, though, we're going to actually film a full episode, podcast, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to just talk about some little topics: faith, marriage, parenting, family, things like that. Yeah. So let's get into it. Rob?
What would you like me to talk about?
Why don't you just give folks a brief introduction? You are certainly much more than just my husband, which I'm so thankful. But just tell people a little bit about yourself, kind of some of your story, your background, so people know more about who you are.
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in Fort Myers, Florida, and then came up to Orlando to go to the University of Central Florida. And that's actually where we met, remember?
I remember.
And then once we met, really, there was no reason to move. So we kind of just put roots down here. I started doing insurance when I really graduated high school is when I got my license. So I was doing insurance. I started my own insurance agency. I have since then sold my insurance agency and retired. And now I'm kind of doing different things that I enjoy. Like I'm doing art, as you know. I'm also doing background acting, which is fun and makes great stories.
So many great stories. And you got to see Brad Pitt, which I was like, please get a photo.
Which I did.
Yes.
And then I'm also running an eBay store where
So much eBaying.
I looked yesterday and it was like 275 transactions I've already done
Gold
with this,
star,
which is,
sir.
it's the best. I like to tell people it's the best 10-month garage sale that I've
It
ever
is.
had because we have made so much money from things we would have donated or thrown away.
Right.
And people are buying these things. So I'm always encouraging people when I talk to them, like, hey, maybe you should do this too, because
You put a lot of effort into it. You don't just like put things up there. You are doing a lot of
I'm going to do it the right way. Like, you know me, right?
so much effort. Yes. Yes.
I'm definitely going to do that. But then also too, like I help you with real estate processes
business.
in your business and stuff like that. I'm applying all the knowledge that I have when it comes to like automations and AI and all of these different things, to what is happening in yours. So
Yeah.
I do that. We've also started a prop tech company that we're working on the low.
On the lowdown, hopefully.
To help agents, realtors, work with like AI and processes and stuff like that.
Defined
So-
AI for our specific industry, and
Right.
it's actually really great. We're seeing the first round draft of it, which is pretty fantastic. We'll talk more about that probably in the future, maybe a little teaser today.
Yeah.
But
So that's kind of me. I feel like we already know who you are because
Yeah.
it's your channel that we're on here.
I'm Anne Marie, and I feel like I want everybody to know more than anything is how much I love Jesus. We talk about our story and how God has really brought us through so many difficult seasons. I'm a mom. We've been married for 20 years, and I've been selling real estate for about that long. I remember getting my license. We had just gotten married, and I was like, I think I want to do this. And you said, go ahead and do it.
You came home crying from the marketing position that you had. You were working
I
in
was
an
at
advertising.
an ad agency, and I
Yeah.
just felt like I was managing like 300 projects. It was difficult, and
You weren't being compensated for any, like you were making, but not enough. Right?
yeah, it was tough. And you were like, just do it. Like, just quit your job and go get your license. And nobody had ever really encouraged me like that. I will say that you are my biggest encourager.
Well, yeah.
And same with Reagan. But I mean, like, I didn't get that like from my dad growing up, which we'll talk a little bit about later.
I still remember that conversation where you came to me, you're like, Rob, I feel like I really want to, because I had asked like, okay, well, what is it you want to do? Because I don't want you to continue coming home crying.
Right.
Like, this is not working out. Like, what is it you want to do? And you were just like, I've always really wanted to do real estate. And I kind of looked around like, then why aren't we doing real estate?
Right.
Like,
and I joined in, I got my license in 2005, and
great
everything
market.
just ended. And I was like, okay, well, I started and had to seriously just grind and like make it work.
You started like short sale, like heavy. Like,
That was, I had like my first year I had like 13 deals, but then it was like short sale city, and that was
I
several
remember
years.
those transactions would go on for like
Months,
7, 8 months.
And so you really had to stick with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's go ahead and just segue into some of the stuff that we went through as a family over the summer. We went to Italy, and that was amazing. I think it was life-changing.
It definitely was.
Yeah, I know that you kind of became a little bit of a conspiracy theorist over the food.
Rightfully so. I don't think it's very much of a conspiracy about how the food in Italy is way better than here in America. And
Yeah.
I'm all for like American food, love American food when it comes to barbecue and all the great things we do, but there is zero comparison to food when you go to Italy because I don't like olives here. I don't like artichokes here. I went to Italy and I was like, I tell my daughter, like, hey, we got to try new food all the time. So let me just try this. And I'm like, these olives are amazing.
Rob's an olive fan, but only in
Well,
that
only
country.
in Italy. Exactly. Like I don't think I found a food that I didn't like in Italy, which was mind blowing.
But you became a conspiracy theorist too because we love Fanta, right? And then the Fanta over there, you said had
the orange soda looked completely different.
different
over
color.
there
It doesn't
because
have
there's
the
no
dyes.
There's no dyes. They actually use orange juice in it. So there's like actually some little bit of pulp, which like you think of, you're just like, wait a minute, that sounds terrible. But also having your orange soda look like highlighter orange isn't
pretty bad.
necessarily a good thing.
It's pretty bad.
But the taste over there, like everything.
Every meal was better than the last. And we got wine at every meal. And it was like, do you want a bottle of wine for $5? Or would you rather have a can of soda, like of Coke?
For 6.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, we'll take the wine and then, some water. And Reagan got into sparkling water. She wanted the fizzy water.
I got into sparkling water over
Yeah.
there because
Yeah.
of how good it was. And it's just and also too, it wasn't just because the taste of the food, but there was no after effects that I had over there.
Let's
like
not
there
get
was
too
no,
deep into that.
No, we won't get into very much detail, but there was no indigestion, there was no heartburn, nothing.
Yeah.
I didn't feel bloated ever leaving a meal, which it's not like I was on a diet when I went over
Right.
there. But when I came home, I lost 10 pounds.
You lost 10 pounds, and I ate the same things and did the same amount of walking, and I didn't lose any weight at all. This is just middle-aged 40-year-old woman. This is what happens to us. We eat the same things, and we get punished for it. So
I can't say anything to that. But, like, again, full-blown conspiracy theorist when it comes to food here. Like, we get served different food than the same food companies that send stuff over to, like, Europe and other countries because of the differences in laws. Like, the FDA here completely allows way more ingredients that the EU determines as being like toxic to people, and they don't allow it in their food.
Yeah.
And so American companies send that better food overseas, whereas here they just fill us full of dyes, and which dyes are created from petroleum products, and you're just like, wait a minute, like none of this sounds good.
you went down a rabbit hole.
I
And
did. Hence why I'm now a food conspiracy
yeah,
theorist.
but when we came back, you were like, "We're doing everything Italy style." We bought a pasta or bought a mixer.
stand-up mixer,
You can
yep.
see that I'm a huge cook. Like, what do you call that thing? We bought a stand-up mixer. You started making pasta, pizza dough. I mean, it's really good. And then when we were going to the store, we started going to Sprouts because I was like, I've heard it's healthier. And we would read the back of just the bread, and Sprouts has those little like small batch things of bread, and it's just like three ingredients. And then you go to the bread aisle or even like the Publix bakery. Sorry, like I used to get the sourdough from there. And I looked at all the ingredients. I was like, I just don't know what any of this stuff is. And if you can make bread with 3 ingredients, I'll just go ahead and take that.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what we've been doing. We definitely, now we're coffee snobs even more so. We got a little pot for the stove.
The stovetop espresso maker.
Yeah. So every day it's a latte, which makes me super happy.
It's because it's better coffee.
It's so good.
And that's the other thing too. Like when we were in Italy, like the pace of life there is completely different.
Yes.
Is it is it as fast paced over there? No. Like, are you going to get anything done with quickness over there? No.
Okay.
But
That's fine.
that's fine with me because they had no to-go cups. So when you would stop in a cafe and be like, "Hey, I want to get a cup of coffee," like they're like, "No, you're gonna
Here's
stay
a ceramic
here.
mug.
Here's a ceramic mug. You're gonna enjoy this little espresso."
We watched people stand. They were in a hurry, but they stood there with their cup and they talked, and then they just when they
and
were
they
done,
were there for 5 or 10 minutes and they were gone, and it's a much better transaction than taking your stuff on the go.
Even when we drove into Switzerland because we went to CERN and we stopped at the most amazing rest area. And I ordered a cappuccino there and I thought, okay, it'll be to go. No, big cappuccino machine, just like you would see at any other restaurant or coffee shop in Italy. And it's on the side of a mountain. And
some of the best gas station coffee ever.
I was like, I will sit down and I will enjoy this. It was fantastic.
It was.
But before we left, we had some sad things happen. We lost our dog.
Yes, we lost Bauer.
15
years on his birthday.
Yeah, we had to put him down on his birthday. We came home and he couldn't stand up straight and he couldn't he was very disoriented.
And he was, for the last 2 or 3 years, on a slow decline.
He was on a decline
because he was getting older, right? Like he had lost his hearing, he was starting to lose his vision.
He was losing his leg function.
Control of his bowels because we would come home and we're like, okay, looks like we're cleaning for the next half hour.
Yeah.
So, but it was definitely super hard to come home and see that, and then
make a decision fast. I had to call the vet and I was like, hey, I think we need to, kind of put Bauer down. And they said, well, we have an appointment in 45 minutes. And I was just like, oh my gosh, we're going to say goodbye to him. He's going to be gone in an hour. That wrecked me. It was right before
we had always we were always asking God, hey, just make it abundantly clear when it happens. And when we came home and he couldn't stand up anymore, he couldn't control, even once we got him standing.
He was leaning.
He didn't have his balance. The way he looked just was completely different.
Yeah.
And even when we took him into the office, and he just laid down and he was just, it was kind of he was just
he was ready.
Yeah.
That was the first time I'd ever stayed with an animal. I was a lot younger when I had to put some of my other animals down. And I had seen something where people said, be with your animal to the end because they've been there with you. And that was so hard.
But I'm also really glad we got to do it as a family.
We did do it as a family.
Reagan got to be there for it's traumatic for all three of us, right? But I feel like it was another moment where even though this terrible thing is happening to one of our family members, this is a growing moment as a family that we have.
Yeah.
And we still aren't over it. We still are, upset about it. And Reagan still prays for Bauer.
Every night she prays, I hope he's having a great time, God, in heaven, running around and staying at your side. It's very cute.
It is. And it's, that was really tough. But then a few weeks after that.
Yeah, a few weeks after that, my dad died. And I haven't been in a relationship with him for over a decade. So it was very weird to have a loss of a parent when you're estranged. And it wasn't always like that. There's a lot of things that happened, I guess you could say, after Reagan came. He, after her crisis, sent us a certified letter that was I'm not going to be in your life, essentially. Kind of blamed me for it. And it's well, we almost lost our daughter. She almost died. And her crisis was on April 8th. And through this process of grieving, I went back and organized all of these emails and things that I had from him and put them in a chronological order so that I could see, okay, this is kind of how things went the last 10 to 15 years, right? And the date on that certified letter, it was to our house and to your office 2 miles away.
The cease and desist letter.
No, that wasn't it.
Oh, okay.
That was the I'm not going to be in your life anymore.
Oh.
April 30th.
Got confused with all the terrible letters.
Yeah. So April 8th, she has her crisis. April 30th, 3 weeks. I think we came home around that time to a certified letter. And it was just such a gut punch. If that would have been the moment to put whatever sort of grudge you're holding on to aside and say, hey, I'm going to just be your dad. Forget about whatever we couldn't figure out before and let's just start fresh from here because I'm going to be your dad and I'm going to be there for you. It was never that. And so when he died and I posted something on my social media, a lot of people were I didn't even know what the situation was with your dad because I never talked about him publicly. People who knew me knew that it was a strained difficult relationship, like many of his relationships, with his siblings, with his parents, with colleagues. I mean, literally with so many people, he had such a hard time having relationship with people. And there's this verse in Matthew 7, and it just talks about like what father would give their child a snake if they're hungry. And I've often said, like, in the last decade, like that was my dad. Like he saw me in need. He saw, heard of me going through brain surgery and breast cancer, and was angry that he wasn't told
Raising
about
a
it.
special needs child.
Yeah. And, he was angry that he wasn't told, but through that process, I think around Reagan's 3rd birthday, I had sent him an email that was like, you're missing out on so much. Like it pains me. It hurts me. Like I said, you're missing out on the biggest miracle that's ever been written. And the response was, I'm so disrespectful. And how dare you talk to me this way? And, basically share your feelings with, as in regards to our relationship. It was cease and desist all your communication. So that was when she was 3. And,
Which I applaud you, like, for always wanting to reach out and try to establish that relationship. Like, I know how hard that was on you, but you always tried to lean in to, like, giving him the chance.
I always felt like no matter what I did, it was never good enough.
Yeah.
And, I have prayed for him so many times and even reached out to him like, Dad, I just want you to know that I love you, would like send an email, and there was no response. But it reminds me too of, because I've just been in the Word and like reading, like trying to like process all of this and figure out like, was there anything more I could have done? And I heard from a friend who said like, he had all the opportunities. God gave him many opportunities before you were born, in the 33 years that you were in his life, and in the 10 years since then. Like, of course, he had multiple opportunities because God is gracious, and I believe that. And so I think that God, gave him over to his mind and his pride and his cold heart. And I was reminded shortly after he died, I had prayed this prayer, and I never told anybody really because I didn't want to pray it. And it was, God, if something has to happen to me in order for him to know you, then let it happen. And after he died, I said, wow, I guess you never answered that prayer, God. Like, I guess you
Right. But that was so wrong.
Didn't want to do that. No, he reminded me, like, no, Anne-Marie, like, you almost lost your daughter.
Yep.
You went through brain surgery. You had breast cancer. He never reached out to you. And it just, I don't know, there's so many verses that I think about. Like, in particular, there's the story of the rich guy and Lazarus, who was really poor. And, Lazarus was begging basically outside of this rich man's house, outside the gate. And the rich man never did anything. And then Lazarus dies. They both die. And the rich man sees, like, oh my gosh, like, Abraham, like, I see Lazarus is there. Can you please just ask him to dip his finger in cold water and put it on my tongue because I'm in agony over here? And he answers, I can't do that. There's like this great chasm between us. Like, you can't go from here to there and he can't go from there to you. Like, that's just impossible. And he's like, well, can you have him go and tell my brothers, because I have 5 of them and I don't want them to have the same fate. And Abraham's like, I can't do that either. Like, they have Moses, they have the prophets, like they have the opportunity. And then he goes, but if somebody came from the dead, then they would believe. And this is Jesus telling this parable. And he's like, even if somebody rose from the dead, basically foreshadowing that this is what he's going to do, they still wouldn't believe if somebody rose from the dead. And to me, I'm like, that's where I land with my dad. Like, there is nothing that I could have done. God gave him all of the opportunities to change his heart, to get rid of his pride, to not care about what the world thinks and all of his possessions. And he chose the opposite. And the fruit of his life reflected that. So that's kind of how I feel about that. And it's hard to land there. But I also, had a chance to talk with the girlfriend and ask her some pointed questions like, did he know he was dying when he was dying? And she said no. And I think some people think, I'll just wait until the end and then I'll make that choice. Like, I was hoping for a deathbed situation with my dad, and that never came.
You were hoping like he would come and
like I would be contacted and like, hey, please let Anne Marie know. Like,
right.
I love her. I'm dying. Like, go send
you could
for
have
her.
A final conversation
Yeah.
with them. Right.
And that never happened. I learned almost a week after he died that he had died. And, you know, he just wasn't lucid in the end. And his girlfriend at the time said, well, he started wearing his cross and saying that he should do better. And I'm like, at 80, I mean, you don't even have the power within yourself to do that. Like, you actually need Jesus. You have to humble yourself and get rid of your pride in order for you to be able to do better. And so the whole thing is sad to me, but I have a lot of peace knowing that I did everything I can and that God loved him more than I did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and he was very like strong-willed, strong-minded, very stubborn. You know, to which, you know, some of those, you know, character traits like you've identified in yourself, like, oh wow, like this is probably where this stuff come from, right? But there's a difference between those two mindsets that you have, because like your focus is looking at others and trying to help and stuff like that. Like, that wasn't him. Like, he was all about like, what's going to lift myself up in situations. Like, he was more focused on what's in my account, right?
Yes. And it's that whole, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul, right? Like, when I learned, and I was expecting this, so I was not upset about it. I processed through it. But, you know, when I asked the attorney, was I written out of the will? Like, I don't want you to feel bad about telling me. Like, I'm expecting it. I'm expecting it. And she said, yes, you were. And I said, okay. Like, but all of that stuff, I said, that's fine because my inheritance is in heaven. I don't need whatever was in that house that I had never been invited to. I don't need whatever was in his bank account because I can't take it with me anyways. He's not taking it with him, right? And he never will have access to it again. So my treasure is stored in heaven, and that's where things last, where nothing breaks in, where nothing is stolen, where moths don't destroy your personal belongings. And like, you know, somebody asked me, do you want his degrees? Like, no. Put them in the garbage.
We don't even have our degrees on the wall.
I don't need that. What good is that going to do for me? I'm not going to take my diploma with me to the gates of heaven and be like, but did you see that I got my degree from UCF? Go Knights, charge on. Like, that's not going to happen. You know what I mean? I got to make my decision here on earth where I want to spend the rest of my life. My real life.
It's finding the importance of things that are fleeting, things that aren't eternal and lasting, versus putting the importance on, okay, what is like affecting Reagan's like eternal trajectory, like pouring into her spirit, like trying to build a joyous home, like trying to, you know, prop her up so that she'll be able to be on her own, you know, and always remember that God is following after her and wanting to, you know, help her with stuff. Not, let me see if I can get this deal done for myself.
Right, exactly.
Let me get a plaque on a park bench. You know, like, we all know that plaque's being thrown away in 10 years
and
when
guess
nobody
what?
remembers.
Nobody's looking at it. Their backs are to it.
Exactly.
Like, is that really what we're aspiring to?
Yeah, and no shots at people that want to do that. Go for
ahead.
it. But
go
like,
ahead. I love to sit down.
That's not the lasting thing that's going to be built. Like, if you're doing it for like some like, oh, this will go on forever. It's not.
It's not. It's not. I got something in the mail from his high school. And they were like, I'm so sorry for the loss of your dad. Very nice. Yeah. He donated to our school for many years. And I was just like, great. Like, what am I going to do with that?
Right.
Thanks for informing me what he did with some of his funds. And that's certainly kind, noble, but it wasn't for anything other than notoriety.
Yeah, like, he did that for the appearance of it. There wasn't like a true...
Right. And
at least when we look at like the fruit of his life.
The fruit of his life is the opposite of somebody who knew Jesus. this is why I never publicly spoke about him. And I feel like now I have the freedom to at least share that part of my story, because it was very difficult to be his daughter. And I never wanted to be disrespectful to him when he was around. And now, though, I feel like I can tell the truth about what it was like to be his only child and how his actions toward me were very hurtful and honestly made me really pursue the Lord, because he's the greatest father we could ever have. He shepherds us. He cares for us. He wants good things for us, wants to prosper us and not to harm us, wants to give us a hope and a future. And I do feel like a lot of the things that my dad did toward me were harmful to my spirit and to like my emotions. It was just a never enough kind of relationship.
Yeah.
And so I had to mute myself to appease, to keep the waters calm. And if I ever expressed myself, it was slapped. That's disrespectful. You need to just shut your mouth, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So.
And there was a C.S. Lewis quote that we had heard in I think a sermon. Did you want to share about that?
Yeah. It says, in the end, there's only two kinds of people. Those who say to God, thy will be done, right? Those who follow God, they say, thy will be done. And those to whom God says, thy will be done, your will be done. All who are in hell choose it. Without that self-choice, there could be no hell. No soul that seriously and constantly desires joy will ever miss it. Those who seek find, those who knock it is opened. It's such a strong, good, factual, filled with wisdom sort of a quote, and it has stuck with me. Like, those who are in hell choose it. And because, to do you have to do the opposite of what the culture is doing when you choose Jesus, and that people find to be difficult. They don't want to say no to the things that they desire.
Right.
So
they want to build themselves up. Like, even in parenting, like you want to keep like propping yourself. Like, no, like you want to, as the goal of a parent is to try to prop your children up so that they can do more than what you were able to do. Right. Not the inverse of that. Not let me push my child down so I can keep building myself up. Like, no, Anne-Marie, go join a sorority so I can look better in front of my peers. Like, that's what he used to say to
when
you.
I quit cheerleading at UCF, he said, what am I supposed to tell my colleagues?
Right.
I said, tell them your daughter's at UCF. I mean, I don't know. What do you want to tell them? Tell them the truth. Like, I will never forget that. But it's a great segue into kind of our parenting segment that we wanted to talk about. Reagan is our only daughter.
Yep.
She has gone through a lot in her short little lifetime, with her stroke and her brain damage and all of that. Her story is incredible. It's one of resilience. It's one of hope. It's one of
restoration.
Yes, that's the word I was going to use. God has completely restored so many parts of her, and
which we are so thankful for, because they weren't ever guaranteed. Like, I remember when we were leaving the hospital after, 3 weeks in there after her stroke, and the doctor basically telling us, like, make her life comfortable. And that to us was like a call to action of just like, oh, you don't know the God that we serve.
Right. And her restoration has, I think, in turn also healed parts of our own hearts and our own wounds, like even in our, with how our parents might have been, my dad in particular. And so we recently switched schools for her, and that was tough, you know?
That was like a 6 or 8 month journey of trying to figure out, like, hey, middle school's coming, and we got great advice from friends, some of those friends that work in middle schools that were telling us, like, hey, like, you should try not to
send her to public middle school.
Yes.
And we were like, well, but we've got the paraprofessional. We love her. We trust her. Like, Reagan is safe with her. And so we would be giving that up. That's really tough to get.
And that's something she had known since she was in kindergarten, right? Because that's 6 years that she had been with Reagan, and they had established a great bond and still have that great bond.
Yes,
like, we still get
we
together.
keep in touch with her, for sure. We just had dinner with her. And, but we went on this journey, and Reagan kept saying, like, I think I can do it by myself. I said, because you're not going to have your para, and she helps you. And it was almost like I wasn't even giving her the credit that she was probably owed, right? I was trying to just like protect her and keep her in this little cocoon. And she's like, I think I can do it on my own. Like, I know I can do this.
That's where her strong will came in of just like, no, Mom, like I can do this.
And we had to listen to that. And she went and she shadowed all these schools, and it was like, no, this one's not quite right. No, this one's not quite right. And then the school that we landed at, we loved it. Like, they gave us a tour while she was shadowing. And then she came home and I said, how was your day? And like, I have never heard her talk so much about how amazing it was and how all the kids were so nice. And they went to this garden and they all said what they were thankful for. And I was like, what?
Yeah. And this school's like 45 minutes to an hour away. And I remember that whole ride home, she talked the entire time about how her day was,
Yes.
which, like, come on, like, she's a middle schooler. We get one-word answers.
Right, it's
but
fine.
like, we just know that. But, like, she was, like, giving so much, and we're just sitting there like, okay, I think
we should be doing this.
I think, like, in our prayers to God, it was like, hey, close the doors that need to be closed, open the ones that need to make this clear. And it was just like, this is obviously the right choice that we should be making.
And we didn't hear back for like a week, but they said, like, yes, we would like for her to come, and she's a great fit. And, like, to hear, hey, we want your child, because there are many schools, Christian schools,
Ton of them.
who completely said, no, we don't have the space here. And
Or said, does she have an IEP? Then no, we don't want her. Like, we don't even need to see her. We don't even need to talk to her. We don't even need to read the IEP.
And I would remind them of the verses, what you do for the least of these, you do to me. Well, we just can't be there for everybody. And
Right.
okay.
And we understand that, right? Like, I'm a
I
product of a
understand it
private
now,
school.
and those would not have been good.
You have to fit in some schools. You have to fit in a box, and if you don't fit in that box, like, there's
gotta go.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I get it.
I think too, like, some people are very afraid to make changes, whether it's a change in career, kind of like how you did. You sold your insurance agency,
Yep.
right? And you sold an asset that was financially supporting us and lucrative. And you felt like God said, I have more for you. Like, sell your agency.
Yeah, I mean, that's truly what I was feeling in my heart from God. Like, it's not that I audibly heard his voice, but that's every thought that was coming to me was, I have something better for you.
And so you told me, and I said, okay, let's go ahead and sell the agency. And
After much prayer and thinking about it, obviously.
but it was a pretty immediate.
It was.
I mean, you didn't.
It's almost like how we started our relationship. Like, we just knew. Like, and when we started, like, I knew immediately, like, hey, I'm going to marry this girl.
Yeah.
And I told you, like, we're not talking about this anymore. But, like, just so you know, this is where, and that's kind of where the decisions have been in like, all throughout our life, of just like, that's where we feel God is like pushing
Big
us and
decisions. He
moving to
said,
us.
do this. We do it. And there are verses that say, I'm the great shepherd. The sheep know my voice. Right. And so you become accustomed to hearing, this is familiar. This is the voice I heard when God said, sign up with this adoption agency. This is the voice we heard when God said, sell your agency. And this is the same voice that we heard when he said, this is the school, move her here. And we had no idea how it was going to go.
No.
We had no idea if we were going to get a scholarship, which we ended up getting 2-3 weeks into school. Hey, good news, your scholarship, her school is
From the
fully
state, yep.
is fully paid for.
Yep.
And actually there's a little money left over. It's mind-blowing. We didn't have any of those answers. And I think when people are afraid to make these big changes, it's because of fear of the unknown, or fear that it's going to be harder.
Yeah.
But harder isn't always like bad.
Well, I think our culture like has that default setting of just like, there's so much out there, and then there's fear kind of creeps in, right? And you have this like culture that's saying you have to succeed. And it's like, well, if you take a chance on something and it fails, like, then, oh, what has happened? Like, I don't want to fail at something. And it's just like, well, actually, maybe you had to fail at that and maybe the next thing in order for have the success, right?
Yes.
So you have to take those leaps on when you're when you hear clear direction, you have to go with it, because we've learned, like, in this life, this is kind of like a river, and it's kind of like a roaring rapids, right? And like, there's going to be times where you hold onto the stone, but can you hold onto that stone forever against the rapid?
No.
It's going to be better just to let go and go with the river, because otherwise you're going to be beaten down.
Yeah.
And so, like, for us, like, when we've heard those clear callings from God of like, hey, we have to, like, this is the direction we need to go, we've realized like time to just let go and see what happens.
Just go. And
because God has always protected us, held on to us, and provided for us afterwards. Like looking back just at the last 11 years, like with the fear that came in with her diagnosis and then how everything happened after her stroke, like, and then the healing that's happened since the diagnosis of your,
all the things,
everything with your brain surgery, the healing that has happened after that, the diagnosis of your cancer, the healing that's happened after that.
Right.
Like, it's one of those just like, why would I question what God is doing?
Right.
Why would I not have faith? Why would I be fearful of this? He's always provided. He's always taken care of us.
And it hasn't always been easy. It's been hard, but it's actually been better. So that's one of the things we were talking about. Like, it's hard to wake up at 5:30 every morning and then have enough time for myself and then make sure that I'm ready, she's ready, and be out the door by 7:15, 7:30 at the latest, But I would do that every single day and make that drive back and forth, because it's better for her. It's not hard for me to drive. I wish I could sleep more, but
well, it's a selfishness, right? Like, am I going to value my selfishness in this decision or like what's best for her?
Correct.
And as a parent, I think the choice is abundantly clear of what you should do.
What you should do. Right, exactly. But so I just want to encourage people, like, if you are on the verge of a big decision and you're afraid because it might be hard or you don't know what's going to happen, you'll never know if you don't take the leap, and you'll never grow if you don't go.
That's right.
So, but yeah, I mean, she's doing better academically at this school. She joined student government.
That was so funny. Like, she, after bringing her home, talking with her on the way, hey, how's school? We're back to the one-word answers sometimes, which is fine. She's tired. I get it. But,
there was just a piece of paper in my car, like on the floor. I said, what is this? Oh, that's for student government. I said, oh, are you joining? Yeah, I went to the interest meeting. There was an interest meeting? Did everybody go? Like, did they make a presentation to the middle school? She said, no, the people that are interested just went. And so now.
And she filled out her form. She got teacher recommendations on her
she
own.
had to
And
do
we're
it all.
going there like,
Wow.
Whoa.
Great. So I followed up with her. I said, did you turn the form in? Yes, of course. At the meeting. What meeting? The student government meeting. Are you on student government? Yes. Like, like, how did you not know that, Mom?
She's like, keep up, Mom, even though I haven't said anything.
I can't keep up. I got to ask all these questions. So yeah, she's, I think, one of 2 kids in 6th grade that's on it, and it's just for middle school. So it's great. I mean, it's something she was interested in.
Yeah, and this is also too, like, another thing, like, she's happily doing her homework now. Like, we are not fighting at all.
Yeah.
Like, we're not also asking either of like, hey, do you have homework? Like, she's just coming home, opening her backpack, taking her binder
and her iPad and just doing it.
And I'm just like, I don't know what we've done right, but let's celebrate this win right now of what's happening. I'm sure things might change in the future, but for right now, we're just going to enjoy it. And we're going to celebrate it and see how long this can go, and whatever we can do to help continue this, like, we're going to do. And she loves all her teachers, right? Like,
she's making new friends.
Taking this leap has been the best thing I feel we've done recently for her.
I agree.
That, yes, taking her to Italy was great. It was a fun experience. She got to have a different, like, it's expanding her worldview on stuff, right? But, like, she's at a new school. I went to a new school 6th grade. Terrifying, right? Switching things. So I could already understand, like, her but she's, like, thriving.
Yeah, I know.
She's doing way more than I ever did in I was just, like, quiet my whole 6th grade year, like, just trying to get through, right? And she's, like, taking on all these other, I'm
like extras that she's doing on her own without even.
She's asking her PE teacher, like, can we learn volleyball? And I'm like, you're speaking up? Like, what have we created
this
here?
Is great. We didn't do anything. I mean, we're just here supporting her. That's all God right there, But yeah.
But that's so different than last year, as well as all leading up to it. Like, at her old school, like, she recently told us about how, like, at her old school, like, she didn't feel like she could be herself. She kind of had to put on a different face to, like, have friends. And I'm just like, when was this?
She felt like she had to maybe change a little bit about herself in order for her peers to accept her, which I never want her to feel that way. She needs to be proud of who God made her, what she has come through, which is more than I would argue most sixth graders in the United States, unless they have struggled with something, massive, it's just not typical that you've lost all your skills at 13 months and then regained them and then are keeping up with your peers in your own way. I mean, she's tenacious,
Yeah, and also to just this, I keep coming back to what you said earlier of just like how her school has been provided for by the state, which is through the Step Up Scholarship.
Step Up Scholarship, yeah.
And like how when we made this decision, we didn't know what was going to be covered and all of that, but like
we had an idea, but it needed to be approved.
But we also wanted to tell others, like, if you're looking at this venture, like, there are other options. You're going to have to do the work to find out where they are. And that's a lot of work to find out. But, like, for someone who has to have a para and a public school to, like, navigate, like, she's on her own.
Doing
like
it all
there's
on her own.
schools out there.
There are.
It's going to take a lot of work to find them for whatever
But do
needs
the
to
work.
fit that your child, but do the work.
It's
exactly.
worth it. Yeah.
But speaking of awards, like you recently got an award just as transitioning to like business, right? But like you recently got an award, which you're not like a big like, oh, look at me, I got an award. But I did want to bring it out. You got the Hat Award?
Yes, it stands for Heart, Attitude, and Tenacity, which
all you, like that's all that defines you.
Yeah.
But talk more about that.
I think my broker nominated me. I had no idea. I saw the nominations go out and I was like, I'm just going to do my thing. I'm not going to really pay attention to this. And then I got a couple of messages like, hey, I'm going to vote for you. And you vote for me too. And I was like, I don't even know what they're talking about. That's how I found out I was nominated, like days after it was out there. And I was like, oh, I was nominated with some of my other peers for this award. And I won it. And there's a lot of agents in our board. We have like 24,000 agents, I guess. And so it was put out there for people to vote. And I won. And I'm glad that I won. I mean, I am competitive. I want to win. But it is hard to be like, oh, look at me and this award I won. I obviously have to. I'm going to mention it, right? Because I want my customers to know, oh, wow, she works hard. And, her peers even recognize it out of this sea of agents, But it's hard because in real estate, when I started, I didn't even have a Facebook. I think Facebook was only for college students. You had to have a college email address to sign up for Facebook. And now it's like social media. You have to be on it. You have to be in people's faces. You have to remind them. I sell real estate.
All the platforms.
All the platforms. We're on all platforms. And you have to remind people, I'm good at what I do. I sell a lot of real estate. You should use me. You should use me again. You should refer me to your people. And that's typically what happens is it's all repeats and past clients and referrals. So,
and you don't necessarily like the having to talk about you part. Like you have to beat your own drum because nobody else is going to, right? Like it's not like you work for a giant corporation that like, hey, we're running ads on the Super Bowl, like to let people know.
I don't have a Netflix show.
Right. No.
You know what I mean?
But you understand the reason to do that, and you do that. We post, you post on all the platforms to do that, but like you don't love. I
don't love it. It feels like a necessary part of the business now as a form of free marketing, and so we do it. But I remember, even after Reagan's crisis, people were like, "Are you still selling real estate?" And so. You have to remind people that, I still sell real estate.
The same for me with insurance. Like I remember when we were in the hospital and like customers would call and my employees were like, hey, like he's not in the office. His daughter, there was something terrible that happened. He's in the hospital. He's been there for a week. Oh, do we have to find a new agent? And I'm just like.
No, I can help you. You know what I mean? And I have people that were helping me during that time. And anyways, we have to, as an industry, be out there, put ourselves out there. But what I've been trying to do actually is take a Sabbath, which we talked about.
And that's been hard for you.
Holy cow. Yeah, I feel like you used to make fun of me when I started in real estate. Oh, you got that 7-second guarantee on that email, Amber. You got that email, got that text, got to respond in 7 seconds. And I was like, I do. I want people to know I'm available. Yep. And then this is cultural. This is America. We talked about how Italy, you're not going to get things quickly, but they're going to have a better way of life. In America, it's like, why haven't you responded yet? I'm guilty of that. Why hasn't this person responded? I sent them an email earlier today, and so.
Especially with me, like you'll like, what was the thing from The Office? You'll
Wolf.
wolf me?
I don't know what
Yeah.
it stood for, though.
It was like you email, text, fax, call, like all of those things, right?
Yeah, I used to do that. And when we used to instant message, I would G-chat you at work.
Oh, yes.
Did you get my text? Did you get my email? I called you earlier, just real annoying
But
like
now
that.
you're trying to do a Sabbath, right? And
I'm trying to do the opposite.
I'm super proud of how you're doing it too, because you are like, you're preparing for it.
I'm trying.
And then you actually follow through with it. Most times you're more successful than other times,
Yeah.
right? But like you're seeing the need for that, and you're
Yeah.
seeing the need like, hey, if the creator of our universe, if God worked for 6 days and took one day off to
Which
rest,
he didn't need to do that.
why do I
Right.
think that I need to work for 7?
He did that as an example to us. Like,
Right.
you humans are so unable to do things in your own strength, and you actually need a day of rest. It's a command. There's only 10. And that is one you think like, oh man, that sounds so great. I would just love to rest and just not do anything. It is so hard. I turn my phone off. I shut everything down. And then sometimes I check it because I'm like, what if there's an emergency? But
But you also have people that are also checking those
I have
things to help
some
with
help.
it. So it's not like anybody's going to experience that, but you had to plan for that. So
Yeah.
you had to set it up that way, which is good. I'm glad you did all of those things because it's making a difference, don't you think?
I think it's making a difference in my heart, in my life, in my ability to see like what's truly important and what's not. Like, there have been customers, most recently, like a few months ago, there was somebody who I fired because they
Yeah.
were so toxic in the way that they spoke to me, the way that they spoke to my assistant, the other agent, how they made us feel, how they completely just didn't value any of the work and the stuff we would do for them. And I said, these are the type of people who will never be satisfied, who are really just here to put people down. And so I fired him. I said, nothing is worth this, and I use that hopefully as an example to my team. Like, there is no paycheck that is worth somebody treating you in this manner. Like, I get my worth from God. I don't get it from people. So I'm completely fine and have total faith that God is going to replenish that with something else. And he did times 10, I mean, that was worth it. I don't need that sort of, somebody who's communicating with me that's churning like all of this anxiety inside of me. We can be done. We can go our separate ways. Goodbye. And that is kind of one of the nice things too, I think, about some of the changes in our industry, like we've been seeing with all these new forms.
Oh, yes. And the lawsuit
And I think...
What are your thoughts on that lawsuit and this stuff? Right?
I have many.
What are the thoughts you want to share?
The thoughts I'll share are, here's some of the good things. One, I think it's going to make buyers more selective in who they're hiring. If you contact... Previously, if you were to contact Zillow and you would be interested in a property online, you're never getting that agent, that has the
agent that
listing.
listed,
You're
yeah.
getting somebody who is paying for leads and who is going to try and sell you anything, right? But they don't know maybe about that property or maybe about much in general. Maybe they're buying leads because they need the business, and if you ended up going and seeing a house with them, that's a procuring cost thing. You're gonna be forced to use them versus buyers actually thinking, who do I want to interview and hire? Because this is the person that's going to represent me. And so I think it's making buyers do what sellers do, which is interview agents and then sign a listing agreement for a term of time. We're going to sell your home at this price. If we don't sell it by the term ending, then we're done. And, if the relationship isn't working, obviously a conversation could be had and you could kind of terminate the agreement. Same with the buyer's agreement. But I do think that it can hurt buyers in the fact that if they truly do not have the funds to pay their agent and the seller is not offering anything, then it's up to them to cover that gap. We've had some new forms come out that kind of address that, which, I won't get into, but would go over with a buyer in person. But it's definitely a change. I think that we'll be seeing agents that aren't as strong leave the business because they don't want to have these uncomfortable conversations about compensation. And that's just going to be part of it. When you hire an attorney, they say, this is my fee. And speaking of, I mean, the attorneys that came after the National Association of Realtors, they're getting 30%.
Those were the people that won.
Those are the people that really
The lawyers won.
That's right. Because even I got something in the mail that was like, hey, do you want to get part of this compensation? The amount was $10 that I would get, So really, that's who won in the end.
Well, you mentioned how there might be sellers out there that aren't paying. Like, as a result of this lawsuit, do you feel like sellers now think that they don't have to pay for a buyer's agent? And if so, two-part question, is that a smart strategy?
So the sellers that I've spoken to, I tell them, we don't have to offer buyer compensation. It's always been negotiable, right? You actually didn't have to offer it. But now we're talking about it more. And so most recently, all of the listings that I've had, I've explained this is what it looks like if we were to offer a buyer compensation or if you were to keep that percentage and pocket it. And most sellers are like, I can't imagine not compensating somebody. I want to make sure that my house is desirable in all the ways. And so they are offering compensation. Are they offering it up front? A lot of them are. Some of them are saying, well, I would think that maybe we could say we're offering compensation and we would just like for you to submit your offer and we will negotiate that. It just makes that part, the compensation, a negotiation term that the buyer and seller have to agree on, essentially, for the buyer's agent. So it can be a little awkward, but people are buying and selling homes still.
But you've said before too, like you want to be able to offer compensation because that's going to expand your pool of buyers, right?
It is, but that field has been eliminated from the MLS. So
as a result of this lawsuit,
as
right?
a result of the lawsuit. So a lot of buyers agents are calling in advance prior to showing, saying, are you offering compensation? Because buyers want to know, and for this house that I might really like, what is my obligation out of pocket for my agent? And if I need closing costs, can those be covered and my agent, or will I be paying a portion of that? And in this market where things are a little bit different than the pandemic, where we saw, homes selling very quickly, they're on the market longer now. And so I do think sellers should be open to offering compensation. It's not required, it's negotiable, and that's what we're supposed to say, and it's written on everything, right?
It's always been negotiable.
It's always been negotiable, but now it is more of a point of conversation.
But even though a seller doesn't offer compensation, like you've had a situation before in the past where I think you were working with a for sale by owner that was like, I'm not paying agents. Like if your buyer wants it, like I'm not going to pay you. And you told your buyer, like, basically, like, here, hold my beer because I'm gonna go ahead and take care of this. And you submitted an offer over with like, hey, let's go ahead and put in unique closing costs because some of those closing costs are going to go to you and they're going to go to pay for the work that I'm going to do because they already agreed, like, hey, like, we want you to be compensated in this. And you're like, that's fine. They don't have to know.
And that was before the lawsuit, so I do think that people understand that agents are not going to work for free. And as a buyer, you can determine what you're willing to pay the agent after you interview and you find somebody that you feel is going to do the best job for you. I think before, buyers didn't really do that. And now maybe they're thinking more strategically about who they want to hire. And they should. They should have always done that. I've had buyer agreements signed for many years. But now it's required. And I think that's also the thing that is a little bit tricky is presenting that to buyers who say, I don't want to sign a form just to see this house. And okay, but that is kind of what the lawsuit accomplished. That's one of the things that is now new as part of our process in buying and selling.
Who do you think was hurt most then by this lawsuit?
I think that buyers probably, because especially buyers who don't have a lot for their down payment, they're just putting a little bit down. VA buyers don't have to put anything down. And if they also need closing costs and they aren't able to pay their realtor, it puts them at a disadvantage if their seller will not cover it. So that I think VA and FHA buyers were probably hurt the most, first-time buyers.
Which aren't exactly the ones you want to be hurting in this process, right?
No, I think
Isn't
that was
that kind
something
of
very overlooked in the
yeah,
process.
that's a very short-sighted decision in all this, because I think both you and I agree, like, especially for veterans, like, can we not give them the world if they're the ones that are
I'm just
here,
saying.
like, volunteering to do something we
Right.
don't want to do? I
Right.
don't want to do those things.
Right.
I didn't sign up to do that. And I have tremendous respect for the people that did. And it's like, why would we put these people at a disadvantage?
I've tried to explain it this way to people, especially some of the customers I have that are doctors. I said, you go into a doctor's office and they ask you for your insurance card, and you give them your insurance card and they say, we'll run this through your insurance, meaning the seller through our contract negotiations. Okay. If the insurance isn't covering all of this, you will be responsible for the balance per your explanation of benefits, which is the buyer agreement. So really, it's just math moving around in different columns and then it's just mathing. That's it. It's just moving it to a different column or negotiating it in a different way. Nobody's going to work for free.
So
That's the bottom
this
line.
whole lawsuit was basically just shifting math around.
That's right.
Perfect. I'm so
And more
glad.
forms, more forms.
I'm so glad this happened to them.
Yeah. I mean, and that's our podcast for today. I think we're pretty much done. We've talked about family. We've talked about God. We've talked about hard things, parenting, marriage a little bit, and real estate. And I think that if you have questions, a lot of people have said they really, I think, prefer hearing us talk about our marriage, our parenting, Reagan. I think that the real estate stuff is just kind of, that's what I do. And there's interest there, right? But the other interest is in some of the more personal topics, which we're pretty much open books. So if you want us to touch on a topic, then comment, DM us. I guess DM me,
Yeah,
because
you,
Rob's not doing the socials like
No.
like I
No,
am.
because I'm helping you with yours.
Yeah, Rob's helping me. He's on the back end doing a lot of things. But
Which I love doing. Like, I
Thank
love
you.
doing that, because not just because it supports you and helps you, but it's just like, I don't have to answer a customer email anymore. I'm glad for that. I don't have to answer phones from 9 to 5 anymore. I'm glad for that.
And
So
you're
how
good at
can I
this.
help you? How can I help you be more, right?
you're good at it too.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us, guys, and we'll be back.